Never go on a walk naked. Just that's the truth, because it's really, really cold outside. The king tried to do it this time. The king thought he had clothes on, but they turned out to be invisible clothes, and he got mated. Let's talk about king safety really quickly here. Why isn't imbalancing king safety such a big deal? The last imbalance we're going to look at is arguably the most common imbalance for beginners to take advantage of, but at the same time, it's often the one that they miss an option to take advantage of more than anything else. So while a lot of beginners might try to start an attack here by going bishop to g5 and being excited about pinning the knight to the bishop, which isn't even a pin, but still it's attacking the knight, so why not be excited about it? Or maybe they could go rook f to d1, which are all strong moves. Don't get me wrong, there are much better moves. Here we have an option, a move that can win the game for us very quickly. I'm just going to pause and give you guys a second. If somebody in the chat wants to tell me what move they think is the winning move, you can go ahead and tell me here. What could white do to try to expose the black king for the weakness it actually is? Now, before I tell you the solution, let me remind you that imbalances often don't appear on their own. Sometimes they do. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes they just appear based on your opening decisions or your opponent's ineptness at controlling their minor pieces or whatever. But the imbalances often need to be created by you. You need to have a vision and say, you know what? I think I could get my knight into a really good square, just like in that last example. Can I make myself have a superior minor piece? So let's move that knight into that credible key square. Or maybe it's a step before that, like, hey, I need my knight to be good, and I need control of the critical hole so that my knight can be good, but I don't have any. So what if I create one? How do I maneuver my pawns around in such a way to force my enemy's pawns to move as well? And at that point, if they move in the wrong direction, or they move because you induce them to do it, maybe they uncontrol a particular square and give you the great option to move your knight into that hole they created, right? That's how you create an imbalance. What we have in this position is the powerful move knight takes f7. And this move exposes the horrible position black already has. One thing to note about black's position here is that black is not developed well. He's not castled yet. His knights and bishops are both very cramped, and his pawn structure isn't very impressive either. Now, he is up a pawn. He does have that advantage, but it's just a tiny, tiny little pawn, just one little pawn. And so white here takes advantage of his superiorly placed minor pieces, his control of the center, and of black's undeveloped position, and has knight takes f7. So if you just move your queen, which is super lame, maybe it's the best move, but it's still super lame, you'd lose your entire rook. Goodbye, rook. So you basically have no choice but to capture it. So now what's the next move? And that's right, queen takes e6. Any retreat of the king would land a checkmate in one. Well, that's illegal. When any retreat of the king would allow for mate. So black needs to play king g6. And there are a couple of really interesting moves. I'm not sure if one is better than the other, but the move that I would definitely play here would be this move, queen to f7. Bishop d3 is also very good, I think. King would have to go to f5 because you'll notice this bishop is eyeballing these squares, so the king would have to retreat while the queen covers this square and this square. King would go to d5 or f5. Now we can play the move bishop to d3, further forcing the king into unknown and uncharted territories. We now control these squares around the king. So the king has to go to one of two squares. I believe his best would be to try to stay away from our pawn structure. If he goes king to g4, I believe the mate would come very quickly. For instance, with a move like pawn to h3, and after king to h4, there may be a forced mate with pawn to g3, which I believe there is. Now the king is trapped. The king can't go here, or here, or here. He has to capture. And then we can play a move like bishop to f5. The king is trapped. The knight has to go to g4, and queen to h5 is a beautiful side rank checkmate. Or actually, it's not checkmate. Never mind. I have to do this first. But then either bishop, queen, or bishop takes g4 is actually mate. So you could try that way, or you could also try to go the other direction, which would be to stay in the center away from our advancing tirade of pawns and play this way. And I think this is going to survive a little bit longer, actually. Now that I look at it, I think that the best way to try to play here would be to prevent the king from escaping. So I would go with the move rook e1. The king would try to escape, and I would play the move bishop f4. Now I cut off this square. The king is cut off from these squares, this square, and of course all of these squares. He has to go to c5, and I'm sure there's a faster way to do this. But the move knight a4 again cuts off the enemy king's retreat. Can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. So he has to pick one of these two. I would go to b4, I think, because d4 lands checkmate in 1 to queen checkmate. So you'd have to go king b4. And again, something like queen c4 would be just easily winning. Now I think the move, I believe the fastest mate is just bishop to d2, bishop to b4, and queen takes b4 is mate. So again, just completely crushing. That's literally black's best try. And white had multiple ways to win there. And it was because black's king was completely naked. Never go on a walk naked. Just that's the truth, because it's really, really cold outside, and it's very unforgiving. The king tried to do it this time. The king thought he had clothes on, but they turned out to be invisible clothes, and he got mated with nothing there to defend him. He was just mated by two bishops, a knight, and a queen. That's crazy.